Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make homemade cinnamon rolls, or maybe you know them as cinnamon buns. To start, we're going to make a yeast dough. Now this dough is a little different than a regular bread dough in that it contains eggs and butter and milk. So it gives the buns a really nice soft and tender crumb. So the first thing is, if you're using a electric stand mixer like I have here, use the paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer. And so in the bowl, put 2 1/4, that's 295 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And to that, I'm going to add active dry yeast. Now, that you need 1 pack, 1 little envelope, which is 1/4 ounce, 7 grams. Or I always buy my yeast in these little jars, so you will need 2 teaspoons of the active dry yeast. And then, just on low speed, I just want to mix the yeast into the flour. Okay. So that's done. And then you will need a saucepan, and you need 1 cup, 240 milliliters of milk. I'm using a reduced fat 2% milk. You can use any type of milk you want for this. And then 1/3 cup, 65 grams of granulated white sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm using the kosher salt. And 1/3 cup, which is 75 grams of butter. You can use either salted or unsalted here. And just cut it into small pieces, because then it will melt faster. So then just put it over medium-high heat. And you want to stir this like almost constantly. And what you want is to bring it just to lukewarm. The butter will be almost melted, and lukewarm is, if you have like a, you want to use a thermometer, a candy thermometer, that would be at about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 50 degrees Celsius. Or the way I do it is I just take a little of the milk and just put it on the inside of your wrist, and it'll just feel warm. That's the other way you can do it. Okay, so let's take that off the heat. And then, like I said, I just put it right here, just like you would like when you're checking a baby's bottle, the milk. And it's just lukewarm. And then I'm just going to pour it into a measuring cup to make it a little easier for you to see what I'm doing. So now what we're going to do with the mixer on low speed is gradually add the milk to the flour. So just low speed, and just pour it in. Okay. And then I'm just going to scrape down the sides. So the warm liquid will start to activate the yeast. So now what we're going to do is add 3 large eggs, 1 at a time. Make sure they're at room temperature, because you don't want cold eggs into our nice warm dough here. So I'm just going to have the mixer on low speed and add the eggs 1 at a time. So just scrape down the sides, make sure that egg's all mixed in. So now what we're going to do is beat this mixture on high speed for 3 minutes. So just set your kitchen timer for 3 minutes and on high speed. Okay. At the end of the 3 minutes, you will notice there's like a real slapping sound of the dough. So that's another way you know that it's beaten enough. So now, what we're going to do, if you have a stand mixer like this, we're going to switch over to the dough hook. Now, you could just knead the rest of the flour in by hand if you don't have a mixer like this, so don't worry. So. Now, what you will need is somewhere between 2 1/4 to 2 3/4 of all-purpose flour to make the dough. So that's about 295 to 360 grams. What I do is I start and I have in 2 bowls. I have the 2 1/4 in one bowl and then another 1/2 cup of flour in this bowl. Because normally I find it needs... Dough is, you can't go exactly, there's not an exact amount of flour. It depends, the humidity, the flour, just a lot of things. So I find it normally takes that extra 2 1/4 and then sometimes a little more. So I add the flour in a 1/2 cup increments, 120 milliliters. So just add that in. And what we're looking for is a nice smooth dough. It's not sticky, but it's really nice and smooth and elastic. So just have it on like low speed. And then you will have to scrape down. Like I said, you could easily do this by hand. And then I'm going to add another 1/2 cup. Just scrape down the sides as you need to. As you can see, I know it's starting to come together, but it's still very sticky. And I think I add a little more. You can see it's really starting to form nice dough. So what I like to do the end part by hand to actually feel the dough. Some people like to do the whole thing in the electric mixer, so I'm going to put a little flour on my surface. And I find that way I can really feel how much extra flour I need. You know, when it's in the mixer, it's sometimes it's easy to put too much when you actually feel the dough. So I'm just going to sprinkle some flour and then just knead it a bit. This is a beautiful dough. It's just smooth and elastic with all that butter and milk and eggs. Really nice rich dough. So that feels really good. It's no longer sticky, or just a little. Okay, so there we have it. So now you need a large bowl. And you can either lightly butter it or oil it, or I'm just using one of these non-stick sprays. And then just take it and then flip it so that the top has a little of the oil on it. So you want a bowl that's large enough that as this rises, it won't go over the top. And then we're going to cover it with a piece of plastic wrap. Now, this is not like a bread dough that really rises. It'll probably rise, you want it to rise not quite double. And because this is such a rich dough, that will take anywhere between 1.5 and 2 hours. It depends on your room. If you have a really warm kitchen, you know, it might be done in 1.5 hours. If it's kind of cool, it could take 2. So just until it's almost double. So now, as you can see, our dough has risen nicely here. So just peel back the plastic wrap and then gently press down to release the air. Like so. And then just cover it back up. We're going to just let the dough just rest for a few minutes while we make the filling. So just leave that. So, as you know, cinnamon rolls need a nice sweet filling. So in a bowl, you will need 3/4 of a cup, that's 160 grams of light brown sugar. And I'm just going to break that up because, as you know, brown sugar can have a lot of lumps. And then to that, add 1/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour, plain flour, that's 35 grams. 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. And just mix that together. And then to that, we're going to add 1/2 cup, 113 grams of cold butter. And make sure it's cold. And we're going to cut that into this brown sugar mixture. And I've just cut it into smaller pieces just to make it a little easier. Now you can use 2 knives, you can use your fingertips, or I'm using a pastry blender just to cut it in here. This till it gets into really small pieces. So this is what you're looking for, just all mixed together. Okay, so let's put that off to one side. And then we're going to roll out our bread dough. So you'll need to just put a little flour. So. This is such a beautiful soft dough. And then with the rolling pin, we're going to roll this into a 12-inch square. It's about 30 centimeters. You might want to have your ruler handy. It's not critical, but that's about right on. Okay, so then take your brown sugar mixture and just sprinkle it there, and then just kind of even it out on here. Leave a bit of an edge. Now, if you want, you can also sprinkle some currants or raisins, about 1/2 cup, 120 milliliters, if you like raisins. your cinnamon rolls. Okay. Now leave an edge right along here, because what we're going to do is just brush it with a little either light cream, half and half, just so our edges are nice and sealed. So I just got a little cream. Just take a pastry brush and just about an inch, a couple centimeters, just. Okay, so now we're going to roll this up. So on the opposite end to where you put the wash. Now don't roll it too tightly. If you roll it too tightly, what you might happen is the inside of the rolls when they bake will kind of pop up. Although that's okay, but just keep that in mind. So just roll. So. And then you can kind of just get it nice like that. You can even measure it to make sure it's still a foot long. And then, let's move this out of the way. You will need a 9 by 13 inch. I like to use the glass and just spray it or butter it. It's like 23 by 33 centimeters. Let's just have that ready. And then we're going to cut our cylinder here into 8 even size pieces. So what I do is I just cut it in half and then cut each side in half again. And just cut each quarter in half. Just use a sawing motion as you're doing this. I find the best. Okay, so then take our pan and then just put your evenly space your pan. So oh, they look nice. If you find the ends are not quite sealed, just kind of pinch them. Give them a little room because we're going to do a second rise here. So a little room. Okay. And then we got to cover that. Now we do have to let these rise again. So what I like to do is just spray my plastic wrap just in case these will rise a bit and you don't want the dough to stick to the plastic wrap. So if you just lightly spray it and then just give it a little room to rise. Now you can just leave these for about an hour at room temperature to rise. Or what I usually do is you can just put this in the refrigerator anywhere from 2 to 24 hours. So you can make them the day before and then just leave them in the fridge overnight if that's what you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let these rise at room temperature for about an hour. So we're now ready to bake our cinnamon rolls. First, preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 190 degrees Celsius, and then remove your plastic wrap. And then just lightly brush the tops of the cinnamon rolls with either light cream or half and half, or if you don't have that, you could even just use some milk. So now into the oven, somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes. You know when they're done, when they're a nice golden brown, and if you take a toothpick and insert it into this part of the dough, it'll come out clean. And also, if you just take and tap one of them, they'll sound hollow. Now, the last 5-10 minutes of baking, if you find your buns are over browning, just cover them with aluminum foil. Okay, our cinnamon rolls are now done. Don't they look lovely? Beautiful golden brown color. If you took a toothpick and inserted it into the center here, it comes out clean. And you can hear that, it sounds hollow. So that's how you know they're done. So then, I'm just going to take a little more of that cream, light cream or milk, and just brush the tops. Okay. And now we'll let them sit for maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll make a powdered sugar glaze. So now for the powdered sugar glaze. In a small bowl, place 1/2 cup, which is about 60 grams of confectioner's sugar. You may know that as either powdered or icing sugar. And to that, start with about 1 tablespoon of either a light cream, or you could even use milk. And stir that. We want it thin enough that we can drizzle it over the top of the cinnamon rolls. Now, you don't have to put a glaze on this. They're very good as is, but gives them makes them even nicer tasting. So let's stir that. Okay, so that's about what you're looking for. Just stir to get rid of any lumps. Okay, that's good. And then I'm just going to use the spoon and just drizzle over the top. Any pattern you want. So there we have it. Freshly baked cinnamon rolls. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.